everybody. Today we're going to be doing lesson 7-4, which has to do with fraction strips. We're going to learn about partitioning fraction strips and using them to help us name and compare fractions. But we're going to go ahead and start with this first quick look. So go ahead and quick look at this circle. It's representing a certain fraction. Go ahead and think about how much of this circle is shaded. If you're thinking 1/2, you are correct. All right, moving on to the next one. All right, here we go. How much of the circle is shaded? If you are thinking 1/4, you are correct because one of the 4 parts in the whole is shaded. And the last one. Yes, 3/4. 3 of the 4 parts in the whole are shaded. All right, so today we're going to be working with fraction strips. You don't actually have fraction strips with you, but you could use a big piece of like printer paper or something if you wanted to, or you can just kind of follow along with what I have. So I have these different fraction strips in front of me, and what we're going to do is we're going to recognize that the entire fraction strip is one whole. In the past, we've always looked at one whole as a circle, but today we're going to look at it as an entire fraction strip. So for our first fraction strip, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and we are going to label this one, or fold it in half really. And I want to know what fraction would we use to label each part of the strip. So if we fold it in half, we would have a fold line here. And I'm curious, what would we name each fraction that we have here? And if you are thinking we would label each of them as 1/2, you are correct because each part of the strip is 1, and the total number of parts that we have in the strip would be 2. All right, for our next one, we're going to go ahead and fold it in half again. But then we're going to fold each of those halves in half. So I'm going to take this half and cut this right here and this one right here. What would we label at each part of the fraction strip? Let's first look at how many parts we have. You're right, we have 4, and each one of these parts is 1. So we would call each of these parts 1/4. All right, let's move on to the next one. We're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to cut it in half, and then we're going to cut each half in half, and we're going to take it one step further. We're going to cut each of those pieces in half. All right, so go ahead and count up the total number of parts that we have within the whole. You're right, we have 8. And we would label each one of those as 1/8. I'm not going to fill all of those in for you, but just recognize that each section is 1/8. All right, for the next one, we're going to do it a little bit different, and I'm curious. What would be another kind of basic kind of way, basic fraction that we might divide things up into? If you're thinking thirds, you are correct. Now, oftentimes we have a little bit trickier of a time doing thirds when we're working with the fraction circles. We're going to have the same kind of issue here with the fraction strips. So let me go ahead and show you an example that would not show thirds. All right. The reason this doesn't show thirds is because they are not equal pieces. So when you're doing thirds, be really careful that you are making sure to make those clear. So I'm going to go ahead and erase those. All right, here we go. Let's try this again. So for thirds, I always recommend that you work really carefully and you kind of like that. And like that. And so see how we have, they're not perfect, but they're pretty close. See how we have 3 equal pieces? We know that each one of these is 1/3. All right, we can use that one kind of as a benchmark type thing again. So I'm going to put my lines right beneath it as well. And then we're going to go ahead and cut each of those thirds in half. How many total pieces do we have? If you are counting up 6, you are correct. Each of these is 1/6. Now we can use these to do some comparisons with fractions. We'll do that on the next page. All right, so now we're going to open up in our math journals to page 227. And I tried to take a little screenshot of what my fraction strips looked like so that we can kind of play around with those a little bit and give us like a point of reference for when we're doing our work. So we're going to use the fraction strips to help compare fractions. So if you look at number 1, you can see that what they did there is they just took kind of what I have up here on my fraction strips, and they showed 1/2, and then they shaded it in to show, okay, I'm comparing one of these two parts. And then in the bottom one, you can see that it's broken apart into fourths, and they've shaded 1/4. So you're comparing these two fractions. Which one of these fractions is a greater fraction? Now there's a little key up here at the top, and you want to kind of use that to help you figure that out. So when I look at this, I say 1/2 is greater than 1/4. So in here, I would draw this symbol to show that 1/4 is greater. Remember, the alligator mouth always wants to eat more ice cream. So whatever is going to give you more ice cream is going to be your bigger fraction. I'm going to get you started on number 2 as well. So number 2 is using eighths and fourths. So over here, we can use this guy to help us with eighths and this one to help us with fourths. So I always go ahead and start by dividing it in half first. And then remember, for eighths, we divided into 4 pieces, and then we divided each of those. Oops, that one wasn't very good. We divided each of those in half again, and then you're going to want to go ahead and label those all in for me. I'm doing the best I can here, guys. And then go ahead and shade in 2 of those eighths. So I'm going to go ahead and shade that in right now. Hopefully your work looks a lot better than my work. And then over here we're doing fourths. So I already divided it in half. And divide each of those in half. And then go ahead and shade in 1/4 and 2/4. It's not beautiful, but can you tell if 2/8 is greater than or less than 2/4? Yes, 2/8 is less than 2/4. So you're going to go ahead and do the same thing for number 3 and the same thing for number 4. And then down here at the bottom, you can see that they don't have any of the fraction strips here for you. You can go ahead and use my example ones, or you can go ahead and just kind of have a visual in your mind of what the fraction strips look like. So totally up to you, either way. All right, hopefully you've been able to wrap up that other page. And now I'm going to have you guys move on to the math boxes. There's only 2 pages for this lesson, so you guys super lucked out today. Go ahead and number 1, and you're going to add parentheses to make the number sentence true. Remember the steps for how to do the problems that have parentheses with orders of operations and things like that. And if they don't have parentheses, well, you're going to add the parentheses. But remember, what part do you want to happen first? If you can't remember the rules, go back to Math Journal page 220. For number 2, you are going to be trying to find which one of those equations, A, B, or C, matches with the story problem that they gave you. And then D is the unknown, and that'll kind of help you there. Number 3, it says that Danielle skates from 6:45 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. before school starts each morning, Monday through Friday. So think about how many days is Monday through Friday. She also skates from 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. in the afternoons on Mondays and Wednesdays. How long does she skate in a week? I would really recommend doing this one on some scratch paper before you try to put the answer in there. This one is a thinker. And then number 4 is just looking at making sure that you have equal equations. So if you know 7 times 6, you know that 7 times 6 is the same as what times 7? And then for the next one, 8 times 6 equals the same thing as 12 times something. This one can be a little bit tricky. I would recommend figuring out what 8 times 6 is first, and then trying to count by 12s to figure out the other side of it. And then look at the third one. You guys can totally do this one. All they did is they took 9 times 6 and they did the doubling strategy. So they used something else to figure out the answer to 9 times 6. And then I'm pretty sure you can figure out that last one. Remember, anything times 1 stays the same. Okay, number 5, totally want to talk about with you. When you look at this one, remember, we want to cover the floor with tile. So if we want to cover the floor with tile, we're talking about all this space on the inside. We are not talking about perimeter, we're talking about area. See that? And when we're doing area, remember, we are talking about multiplying rows times columns. And these problems like this, these are those rectilinear problems. And we want to figure out how to divide it into 2 smaller rectangles. I would really recommend going like that, figuring out the area of this one, figuring out the area of this one, and then total area, hint, hint, you're going to want to add. So here's the number models I would use. I would go like that and do rows times columns for the first one, and then I want to add it together. I want to do rows times columns for the second one, and that'll help me figure out my total area. All right, good luck. I will show you the homework page next. All right, here's the home link for today. In these first 4, you're just going to be shading each rectangle. And when you shade each rectangle, shade them neatly, please. And make sure that if it says like 2/3, you're shading 2 pieces that are right next to each other. See how the example has 2 pieces that are shaded right next to each other? Beautiful. Okay, so that's the first 4. Then you're doing like what we just did in the practice pages where you're comparing the fractions, and it's super nice because they already shaded it for you. And then in the bottom part, it talks about making an estimate and then showing how to solve the problem. And it talks about showing how to solve the problem on the back of the page. Can we maybe try to solve the problems in like some open space on the front? Because then you do not have to scan 2 sides. So I would go ahead and do that. And then remember, we are checking to make sure our answer makes sense by comparing our actual to our estimate. And don't forget our favorite, the unit box. Good luck, you guys.